Okay, so welcome to another episode of Let's Chat With. I'm here with escape artist, actor, and street performer, Miranda Allen. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, during the pandemic, people have exercised, learned to cook, but you've been going at it a little bit differently. You and your fellow magician, Carissa Hendricks, she handcuffed you to a fridge so you don't get burnt by popcorn. And then you were hung upside down in a straitjacket, and she tried to cut your hair so she could cut your hair up. Why?
Yeah, that's how we got this haircut right here.
Nice.
Why? Well, uh, I think the role of an escapologist or escape artist, it kind of hits at the root of like very, very old school traditional theater. I think that because escapology has such a simple storyline, I'm going to do this thing, it's going to be dangerous, I'm going to overcome the thing, yay. It has a lot of ability to provide catharsis or like emotional release for people. And that can be dramatic catharsis or it can be comedic catharsis. And so I think amongst the pandemic, we needed that. And also we felt that, the people that enjoy our work needed that. And so while trying to, grieve the loss of our touring schedules and, all of the other pandemic things that everyone had to go through, we also found ways to make, silly, fun bits to share with the world.
You could have gone into any style of magic, like coin close up. Why escapologist? Why be an escape artist?
Well, I was really interested in street theater. So I came from a classical theater background. And, I did a lot of Shakespeare and a lot of like classical Greek tragedy and things like that. And I really like things that are heightened. And I really like things that, can connect to people on a really deep level. But when I first got out of theater school, my first acting gig was with a giant puppetry company. And they taught me to stilt walk. And stilt walking kind of became my day job. And then I found myself stilt walking at all of these events and festivals that had street performers. And I thought this was incredible. I was like, these guys can make theater anywhere for anyone. It's so much more accessible, right? You don't have to be able to afford to go into a big fancy theater. So I became really curious about street performing, and I had an opportunity to go and spend some time in Australia learning how to street perform. But I very quickly learned that my existing skills were not skills that people wanted to stay and watch on the street. And so I learned my first straitjacket escape as like a holdover trick. I was really not interested in escapology because, like I said, it has such a simple narrative storyline. I thought it was really reductive. But then I saw the way that audiences reacted to that straitjacket. And I decided, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to dive in and I'm going to create unique escapes and original escapes and contribute something to the history of escapology. So why escapology? It was convenient and I hated it. And then I discovered it had the potential for really interesting depth and I loved it.
What's the response you get when you tell people that you do these type of stuff, that type of escapology and escape?
People say, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm an escape artist. And they either go, what? Or they go, what? Commonly, their next question is like Houdini. Some people have no idea what that means, or they think that it can't possibly mean what they think it means. So they'll understand what it means, but they look at me and they go, you're not a big, strong, angry, muscly man with too much energy. Why would you do that to yourself? So I do really have to kind of explain it to people. But usually once I explain it to people, they think it's really, really interesting and exciting. And sometimes I don't bring it up at cocktail parties because there will be too many follow-up questions if I do.
What's the human fascination with seeing other people put themselves in danger?
Well, I think it comes back to this idea of catharsis that I was talking about. I think that the role of the escape artist is to be a vessel for other people's emotional release. And I think you can apply that to a lot of the arts. That's, historically sort of how art became a part of our societies. So I think that, I think the role of an escape artist is to let people put their worry and their fear and their panic and their pity into you so that they can feel themselves overcome their fears by watching you overcome the challenges that you put upon yourself as an escapologist.
So you've done you've escaped from straitjackets, and you did an escape from a barrel. You performed
I
on Penn
did.
and Teller when you did that. What was that like for you?
That was incredible. That was a really lovely experience. The barrel escape started because I was standing in a garden in Australia at a festival, and they had these lovely barrels out as tables to, rest your drinks on. And I was standing there talking to a friend, and I stepped back and I was like, I think I could fit in there. And that was the beginning of the journey towards the barrel escape that I did on Fool Us. But I often find that sometimes in magic, particularly in escape stunts or illusions, we can lose track of the human element. We can lose track of the person that's disappearing into the milk can, the barrel, the box, the illusion, whatever. And so something needs to be happening on stage to help the audience stay engaged with that person. And commonly that involves flourishing assistants and things like that. So I started to ask questions about how could the person performing the trick with me, assisting me, become more of a performing partner and become almost like a chorus, a Greek chorus that would help the audience know how to feel about me being in this barrel. So that was the concept that Sarah and I, or originally Sam and I, started from in working on the barrel escape. How does the relationship of these two people and one of them putting the other one in a barrel affect the audience and become an important part of the story? And as we were developing that act, there was a lot of people that did not think it was going to work. There was a lot of people that were like, look, you just need your assistant to be invisible. You just need to do the thing and make it badass and just get in the barrel and say it's going to be scary and then get out. And we pushed and pushed, and a lot of wonderful people like Carissa Hendricks and Jonathan Goodwin helped us shape exactly what we were trying to say so that it would be clear and so that we could get it through. And the most rewarding part of being on Fool Us was that the first, probably, I think Carissa got it pretty quickly when we showed her the act, but Penn and Teller, when they saw it, they got it immediately. They immediately got what we were trying to do with the relationship between the two onstage characters and the storytelling of the act. And that was really rewarding, because that's so much of what they do, is they make the audience care because they care about the relationship between Penn and Teller.
And why wine? Because most people do it out of water.
Well, in the word, yeah, well, as Teller said to me backstage, wine comes in a barrel. Originally, when I first created this act, I was doing it in a little site-specific theater piece that happened in a distillery, just because I know that I won't make things unless I give myself a deadline. And in that, we were using extremely diluted whiskey, because obviously whiskey has a much higher alcohol content and it's much more expensive. So I'm not going to get in a whole barrel of real whiskey because that would hurt a lot. But the original concept was that it would be whiskey. And it was Jonathan Goodwin, who's a wonderful escape artist, who suggested wine. And I'm so glad that we went in that direction, because the color of the wine is just so rich. There's something visceral about it. There's something bacchanal about it. And as you said, it's unusual. I haven't seen, I don't know if it's happened, but I haven't seen anyone else do an escape out of wine. And I think it's really fun that my shirt comes out a different color.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody on the show yet do one yet out of that. Shifting gears, you are a street performer when you perform some escapes under the name of Tiana the Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like a cross between Angelina Jolie's Lara Croft, Indiana Jones, and Nathan Drake from the Uncharted video game series. Can you tell me a little bit about Tiana?
Yeah.
Traveler?
Well, I was going for Lara Croft meets Doctor Who. So you got pretty close there. Yeah, Doctor Who is mostly in the coat. Oh, I love that coat. It's so hot in the summer, though. So Tiana the Traveler is a character that I created when I started wanting to move towards street performing in more festivals and things like that. And the idea behind Tiana is that she travels the world collecting unusual stories and stunts. But the core of like who Tiana is that all of her travel and all of her shows are really about meeting people. And they're about finding the joy in interacting in all of the things that make us, every person and every culture and every part of the world, every landscape unique. And finding the thing that's like joyous and unique and lovely in everyone and everything, without being above also making fun of it. I like to think of her as a sort of warrior and a princess, not to be confused with Xena, warrior princess. It's her jam. But I really wanted something that could be fun and feminine, but also like incredibly strong and grounded. So in my street show, at least pre-COVID, I did a whole thing with a kid where I would pick a kid from the audience that volunteered, but was like the most hesitant of the volunteers. Like clearly this kid wanted to be in the show and wanted to help, but was not the one jumping up and down, was the one that was like, I want to help, but I've never done anything like this before. Maybe I'll do it. Like that kid that's a little hesitant, right? And I bring that kid up and I do like a balance thing with them to help build trust. And then through the whole show, that kid basically becomes like my hype man through the whole show and helps build the excitement in the audience. She gets to boss the grown-up around a little bit that's tying me up, which is fun. And then at the end of the show, I have this treasure box and it has coins in it that I've collected from all over the world. And at the end of the show, the kid opens the box and I tell her, usually her, sometimes him, I tell them, pick one of those little bags. Inside that bag, there's a coin. I don't know what country it's from. I don't even know how much it's worth. But one day when you're grown up, find out what country that coin comes from and go visit that country. So in that show, I really try and pass on that love of adventure and discovery. So essentially my street show is a show in which I play a very adventurous character and I get tied up and I make moms cry.
Okay. You get many responses from kids that say they love your show and performance with Tiana. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's really touching. A lot of them come from kids. Sometimes they come from adults. I've had people who are getting out of really bad divorces send me messages, dealing with long health problems, but also children who have felt, misunderstood or shy or somehow restricted. It's very encouraging. It's very motivating. It's wonderful to know that I can create things that can do that for people. And I also come back to, I think that's part of why I'm an escape artist, because most people feel trapped in some way or stuck at some point in their life. And being able to stage that for people and, pass on this concept that there's always some kind of gap. You just have to find it. Is nice, and as someone who grew up in a really, really small town and was fairly misunderstood, it feels very triumphant to be able to pass that hope on to other people. Yeah.
You are a classically trained actor with a BFA in the acting from the University of Windsor and studied at the Moscow Theatre School. What got you into acting?
Well, like I said, I grew up in a really small town and I was a very energetic, imaginative, talkative, just huge personality kid. And, if I could entertain people, that was a place where that fit. It wasn't inconvenient. It was an asset. Sometimes I definitely still managed to cross the line and make it inconvenient, but, I discovered there was the potential for it to be an asset. And so my mother started looking for like summer drama camps and, things like that. And I started to find theater as a place that was really fun. It was a fun place to put my energy and my creativity and just to put all of that silliness and imaginativeness. But I didn't know that was a job. I had like a whole list of things that I wanted to be. One of them was a detective. I'm pretty sure I just wanted to be a detective because I thought detective stories were cool. Basically, I just wanted to act being cool. I wanted to act cool jobs. But I didn't know that at the time. And then a friend of mine moved to Stratford in Canada, which has the largest theater festival in Canada. And his mom called my mom and was like, there's like this theater thing here, and they have a summer program. I don't know, maybe Miranda would like it. So I had the opportunity to go and train at the Stratford Festival of Canada and meet all of these wonderful professional actors. And that was the first time that I realized that like acting was a job. The people in my TV, that was what they did with their lives. And so I scoured all the programs from that theater company, and I was like, okay, the largest group went to the University of Alberta acting program. And then I researched that, and I was like, okay, the next largest group went to the University of Windsor, and I researched that. But in my brain, I decided that I wasn't going to be good enough to get into the U of A BFA. And so my plan was that I would audition for all of the top BFAs, BFA conservatory programs in Canada. And then when I didn't get in, I was going to go au pair in Europe for a year and then come back and try again. And my first audition for the University of Windsor accepted me on the spot. And that's how I got into the pathway towards professional acting.
So you also studied at the Moscow Art Theater School. What was it like going over to Moscow?
Oh, it was wild. So that was a study abroad that I did through the University of Windsor. It's a combined program by the University of Windsor and Wayne State, which is in Detroit. And it was a delightful culture shock. But also I'm just so grateful for the experience, because I think it was the first time I had traveled without my parents. And it was just very cool to interact with people who had such different, they just understood the world in such different ways. And I'm of European descent. You wouldn't expect, people who are living in Russia to be that different from people living in Scotland and Britain, but culturally, and the way that people look at the world, it's quite different. What's expected of you if you're in public, is much more subdued, and what's expected when you're in private is much more exaggerated. And what's considered excellence and what's considered drive and motivation is very different. And it was really interesting working with the teachers there. And we would do a project, and if one person's presentation wasn't good enough, the whole class had to do the project again. And I remember when we got to the point of like presenting things as a whole group, because everything was done through an interpreter. And I remember we presented this thing, and one of our instructors, I believe his name was Sergey, which is a very common name there. He just went on for like 5 minutes. And Russian is a very feeling language. So if you don't, to an outside ear, so if you don't speak it, it's hard to know what someone's actually feeling as they're talking, because everything sounds so big. But he was going on and on and on, and he sounded very like aggressive and assertive, and all these notes on. And then finally he finished, and our interpreter just went, he says act better. And I am confident that is not the entirety of the content that was in those notes. But I still remember this to that day. And it sounds horrible, but in hindsight, it's just so delightful to look at that, And I think about like, I had this funny situation happen where I was in a shoe store with one of our interpreters and a few other women on the program. And there was this man that approached our interpreter and decided he was in love with me. And so the interpreter invited him to dinner with us. And it was one of the most awkward experiences of my life. This man barely spoke English. I don't speak any Russian. There's not a problem with that. It's just, I'm a very talky person. It's hard for me to especially then, I've interacted with more people that don't speak English now, but especially then I didn't know how to exchange ideas without words. And this man started like following me to school and classes, and it was quite scary at the time. And eventually but he kept leaving me all these gifts, and there's all these different people being like, oh, like you should you should go for this. He has a nice car. He's leaving you these gifts. But it wasn't like, oh, he's got a nice car. It was like, this is a good decision. This man has a good income and a nice car. I was really conflicted. And when I finally told him, like, look, I am just from a different world, and this is not something that I can do, he sobbed in the parking lot of the ballet. And big, manly sobs, like unapologetic, explosive emotion. And I was very uncomfortable with that at the time as well. But in hindsight, I still think back about that, this idea of like crying like a man. And I'm just so grateful for all of these experiences that happened, both in terms of like the focus that I learned as an actor and the dedication, but also to just see the different ways that people can be, and the different ways people can interact with themselves and the world and with their feelings and their emotions.
Does being classically trained actor help you with your performances in any way?
As an escape artist?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Well, firstly, as a street performer, people come to street performing from lots of different disciplines. I know people that have come from being chronically unemployed. I know people that have come from cartography, insurance, sales, robotic engineering, circus, all like gymnastics, all kinds of different disciplines. And coming from theater was definitely an asset because, unlike someone who came from robotics engineering or cartography, how to hold space in front of an audience, like I already had that box ticked, and how to project and speak clearly. But as a classical actor, you do not learn a lot about writing and creation. You learn about how to interpret these really minute clues in texts, right? And you learn about how to craft an emotional journey. So in terms of crafting an emotional journey, that's been really important to my work, because I like to use escapology to move people. But learning to craft routines that carry that emotional journey is something that I still feel frustration about to this day. And I'm sure I'm much better at it now than I think I am. Perhaps I'm just doubting myself after all this time off because of the pandemic. Yeah, so it's very interesting how there's so many things that translate that I've gotten out of all of my experience as a classical actor, which I still do from time to time. But then there's just this one thing when it comes to creation and writing new material that I think it feels even more daunting because it's such an obvious gap with the rest of my experience.
So finally, where can people find you online? Twitter, Instagram, and all that stuff.
You can find me on, I'm the most attentive to Facebook, though I do exist on Instagram, and technically I am on Twitter. What's the best link to give you? Probably if you just search Miranda Allen. You can also find my YouTube channel, or you can look at my street performing character, which is Tiana the Traveler, and most of my handles are Tiana Travels.